All right, let's get a little weekend report going here. Jake, you were in Happy Valley. It was a little wet over there. How was it?
It was, a little wet, a little cold. It's my favorite place to play on the road. I had not been in the booth for a game, so I was super excited to see the environment. The fans showed out even with the conditions. I'll give them credit and understand it was going to be a blowout. Had a great time. Joshua, they have a board there. Anytime, if you're a broadcaster that calls a game, they put you on a board up in the booth. So excited to get my name added to that.
Yeah, your name will go up there. I have not done a game there, so certainly no name for me. I was in South Bend over the weekend to watch Notre Dame absolutely have their way with USC. I was super excited, man. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Going to see Caleb Williams live and in person. I stayed out there.
Well, you saw him.
For the first drive. I didn't see Caleb Williams. I saw an imposter.
Yeah.
That was not Caleb Williams. I was super disappointed. South Bend is great, though, and I would say that the energy that they had coming off of a loss to Louisville was as good or better than the energy that those fans had when Ohio State came to town.
Yeah.
So you could tell it's a big deal as a rivalry game for them against USC. Handle business like champs.
Something about a night game, too, huh?
Yeah.
That's that cool, crisp fall air. Special.
Crisp fall air. Absolutely love it. But this is Red Corner, Blue Corner, right here on Stadium. That's Jake Butt. He played his football at the University of Michigan, was a great player there, too. All-American Mackey Award winner.
National champion, captain, NFL linebacker, college linebacker, Ohio State Buckeye. We got a good week this week, man.
It's going to be fun.
Penn State, let's go.
Let's
go.
You got a rivalry game, too, that your boys are going to be right in the middle of. Don't know how good Michigan State is, but I do know that Michigan's really good. We want to bring you into this show as well. You, the fans, drive this thing, so we want you to scan that QR code right there on the screen. Question for the day, which is wild. Will Iowa end up playing in a Big Ten championship game? We also have a YouTube chat that is always on and popping, so make sure you get in there. But a new week means a new batch of college football rankings, and there was no movement in the top four this week. Michigan and Ohio State holding steady at 2 and 3. Penn State, though, they slide down a spot with Washington jumping up after their big win against Oregon. So this sets up a huge matchup between the Nittany Lions and the Buckeyes, as you mentioned, Jake. Path to the playoffs is going to make a stop in Columbus. So are we at that point right now in the season where this is a must-win game for either of these teams?
You know, this is kind of the tough part with the Big Ten it's a down year in the Big Ten is there's few opportunities to have a statement to the committee to say you belong there. Ohio State's beat Notre Dame. Okay, that's good. They'll play Wisconsin later in the year. And with Mordecai out, that's probably not going to be a needle mover, right? Yeah. Penn State's beat Iowa. They'll probably remain in the top 25. It's not maybe not a sexy win, right? But the opportunities are few and far between for the rest of the season. You'll feel good getting ahead of it as the winner. I think the loser, you might lose some sleep. If you lose this game, you'll probably need some help from other teams.
Yeah, I think the assumption here is if whoever loses this game would have to go on and beat Michigan to have a chance to make it.
Probably beat them pretty handily, right?
To the college football playoff there. I'm not exactly sure that either team is equipped to do that right now. But I would also look at the rest of the landscape in terms of what a one-loss team would be able to do, because on the West Coast, we're looking at teams that have one loss now in USC and Oregon, but we think that they're still good teams, maybe Oregon more than USC at this point. Washington has an opportunity to run the table. You look at Texas, who's a really good one-loss team. Oklahoma's right there in the mix, could get a rematch, and then who knows what happens if Texas actually wins that, what they would want to do. The ACC is still interesting to me with Florida State, and you've got UNC there in the mix, right? And so I'm just looking at college football holistically. And we haven't even mentioned the SEC and the fact that Georgia now without Brock Bowers could be interesting. Alabama might be getting better at the right time, too. They've been playing solid football as of late. There might not be enough room in there for a one-loss team from the Big Ten to get in.
Here's the thing, though. Whoever loses this game could still make the Big Ten championship.
Yes.
The way the tiebreakers break out. Like, if you lose this game and then beat Michigan, there's certain tiebreakers. The loser of this game still can go to Indy. If you do lose this game, you have to beat Michigan. We're not talking about them in this context, but the team, a loss in a game of the big three that would hurt the most is Michigan.
Yeah.
They have no marquee wins.
Right.
They need to win both those two games to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think we can say that if Michigan is, in fact, the team that takes a loss, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
And schedule doesn't set up. Obviously, it's setting up for them just fine because they're dominating through it, but then people are going to relitigate what that team actually is if they do take a loss.
What if I told you that there could be a playoff team outside of these three? Would you believe me? It's not just playoff contenders for Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. There is one team in the West. Dare I say it, the Iowa Hawkeyes are sitting at 6-1 with a favorable schedule. They could end the season 11-1, and then you're looking at a Big Ten championship, 60 minutes. Can you get into the playoffs, Iowa? Look, they were a punchline to start the season. Joshua, what's your thoughts on Iowa? How do they sit right now?
There's still a punchline to me, but they're a punchline with only one L in the loss column. This is the wildest thing because here's what it would come down to. If Iowa was able to run the table in the rest of their schedule, which they can do, make it to Indianapolis, possibility, is an 11-1 team, and then win a Big Ten championship, I still don't think anybody's putting them in the college football playoff. I wouldn't do it. I would look at all the scenarios that we talked about. Is it an opportunity for two teams out of the Pac-12 to get in there? Do we like somebody from the ACC? Let's say North Carolina and Florida State both make it to the ACC championship undefeated. Do you like both of those teams to go to the college football playoff? Are we talking about the Big 12 scenario where either one of those teams has a loss now and we think they're great and we put Texas and Oklahoma both in there? Iowa should not get in there, nor would they deserve to get in there, even if they were a one-loss team with a win in the Big Ten championship game. You cannot rank in the 130s offensively and be a college football playoff team. This is not a scenario that could ever happen in my mind.
Listen, I am with you. I am with you. Even if they go 11-1, and even if by some miracle they score 20 points in the Big Ten championship and win that game.
20 points.
There's just no way we can put them in the playoffs, right?
It's an unserious team.
We will have to have the conversation. At that point, we will have to have the conversation. But
you can have it by your damn self.
Well, here's a different conversation for you. Let's say that happens. Let's say they win an 11-1 season, and maybe the conversation starts there. Let's say they go 11-1 and win the Big Ten championship. In my opinion, Kirk Ferentz is the coach of the year. And there's two ways to look at it. At one end, you have to say, Kirk, there's no way we can have you the coach of the year because of all those offensive numbers. I look at it the opposite. I say, Kirk, because of all those offensive numbers, and you still go 11-1 in this scenario, I have to give you the coach of the year. Look, it's on the coach to stay disciplined and stay true to yourself. The Iowa knows they cannot throw the ball to win games. A lot of teams know that. Wisconsin knew you shouldn't throw it 50 times last week against Iowa, and they did it anyways. Kirk Ferentz is the leader of this team, and he is the guy that stays true to the Hawkeye principles and knows what it takes to win games, and that's exactly what he does. All that ugliness on offense. If they go 11-1, just that might be enough. If they win the Big Ten championship, he is a lock for Coach of the Year.
Like, this is crazy.
A lock for Coach of the Year.
Crazy town. This is
lock.
This is everything that is wrong with society at large today. We're going to reward bad behavior. So you're going to tell me that there's a scenario where their offense got worse statistically year over year, and we're going to give this man Big Ten Coach of the Year. You're going to tell me that there's a scenario where he should have made a change, fired his own son. Nepotism took over, and he decided not to do that, and they did not improve. The metrics did not get better, and we're going to give that man the Coach of the Year trophy? Absolutely not. And I understand what you're saying about keeping the locker room galvanized and keeping things together, and that is important. You can't go back-to-back weeks, and I don't give a damn if it's a win, where you only have 6 completions in a game if you are not a service academy, and expect me to say that that is Coach of the Year worthy. Give it to Jim Harbaugh in back-to-back years. Find an excuse to give it to Greg Schiano. Hell, give it to Mike Locksley, even though they lost to Illinois. I don't give a damn. But this, to me, would be disgusting. It would devalue to me what being a Coach of the Year is.
Dude, you could get Mike McDaniel down there with the Dolphins. You could get Lincoln Riley. You could get freaking Albert Einstein to meet with quantum physicists to figure out the best offensive attack. It doesn't matter. Brian Ferentz has his hands in this. It's not just on him. Cade McNamara out for the year. Luke Lachey, Eric All, your best tight ends. Luke Lachey out for the year. We're still waiting on Eric All. They've been injured at the running back room. He has to take accountability for the offense. But They have been beat up too, so I can't say it's all on him. I don't care what the system is.
Before they got beat up.
I don't care what the system is.
I feel like that's an excuse. Like if they were humming on offense and then all of a sudden they get the injuries and they become bad, I could overlook that and they're able to piece it together. They were going to be bad regardless. This stat right here that we have up to 10-1 all time when Torrey Taylor punts at least 8 times. So. Your punter is your biggest weapon, and I'm supposed to say you're coach of the year.
Listen,
Oh,
my point, we've got here because the offense doesn't attract recruits and say, please come to Iowa. In fact, it kind of dispels them away, Charlie Jones and Purdue last year. But the fact of the matter is the system is the system. It's not like they have weapons. We've seen how many balls hit receivers in the chest in drop.
Tyrone
right?
Tracy ran away from that offense too, by the way.
It's not just them too. There's a few of them. The players really aren't built. You could have the sexiest, best offensive system right now, and I don't think that they're even a top 70 offense. I don't think they have the players. So it goes back to Kirk to say, understanding that, he looks at Brian and says, hey, I don't care what the media says on 3rd and 5 in plus territory, run it, and we're okay punting it. We trust our defense. That's coaching. That's hard to do.
It's not
I know
coaching.
it's ugly. It's hard to do.
Coaching. Coaching is recruiting the players that you can recruit.
That's part of it.
And developing them to rise above their level. I don't care about Deacon Hill not being the starter to come into the year. There's a way to coach drops out of guys. You get them on the jugs machine, they catch a bunch of balls, and if they can't do that, you put other players in the football game. They knowingly put those guys in there. There's got to be somebody, I don't care who it is, that can catch the football with consistency on that sideline. Deacon Hill has not been equipped with scheme and with development to come out there and complete more than 6 passes in a game, and they pulled back. This is the craziest part to me. They pulled back the pass attempts from before. Right? Because it went from a 25% completion percentage to a 45% with 6 completions. They threw the ball less because they said this guy can't do it.
That's coaching.
No, coaching
That's coaching.
We have to get you better than just 6 completions. We have to get you to a point where we could throw the football 20, 25 times if we needed to.
That's an off-season conversation. Week to
man.
week, it's marginal improvements.
It's not even been marginal. Has not even been marginal with the improvements. I got to take a break right here because I need to lower my blood pressure. This is ridiculous. But coming up, we're going to check in on the Michigan changing landscape of college football. Best way to rebuild a program, talk a little Northwestern, talk a little Michigan State when it comes to that. That's in just a few. But first, as a reminder that the start of the NBA season is just around the corner, so we need you to join us on Tuesday, October 17th for the ITA tip-off special. The NBA insider Shams Charania will be in studio along with Cam Smith, special guest Amon Shumpert, and the face of the front office, Pat Garrity, as we get you ready for opening night in the association. That's next Tuesday at 3 Eastern, right here on Stadium. we're back right here, red corner, blue corner. And we got to talk about Chop Robinson there at Penn State. He has a new NIL deal, signing with the Pennsylvania Pork Producers Council. Sounds like a great deal for a guy who's got the name Chop. Pork chop if you couldn't put it together out there at home. Where are we at on this? You like that?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I bet the rest of the D-line loves it. I bet all the big fellas love it. They're eating pork chops, some bacon on the house. You had a similar NIL deal, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a deal I had when I was in the league where I got a little money from the California State Milk Advisory Board. We would go around to elementary schools and we would encourage kids to drink milk so they could build strong bones. And really what goes on there is we got a bunch of these farmers out here who'd like to sell milk, and we need to make sure that the milk is moving. I'm not a guy who consumes milk by the glass, so just ended up that right opportunity at the right time.
Is there any pictures of you with the milk mustache that got milk?
No, but there was a picture of me on a bicycle with a bunch of kids wearing a Chargers jersey as I was telling them to drink milk.
Nice.
Yeah,
good.
So.
Well, kids, yeah, Bill, I drank a lot of milk growing up. Did you ever hear, hey, drink milk and it'll make you grow taller too?
Yeah, and I didn't. I was allergic to milk actually as a youngster, which is kind of crazy. So the idea that I was encouraging other youngsters to drink milk is wild. Patrick R. says, ugly perfection baby, in reference to Iowa. We talked about the whole break. I still can't get over this thing. It's wild to me. But we got to check in on our picks from last Thursday. Annie Agar, who we had in studio as our guest, had the best week, going 4-1. And the difference, well, she had Washington beating Oregon. And me and Jake, with our little brains, did not. And that was a hell of a game as the Huskies went on to beat the Ducks. Now they're the last unbeaten team in the Pac-12. So, I mean, are they running the table? Is this a surefire college football playoff team here?
If they run the table, absolutely. I think even if they have one loss and can still win the Pac-12 championship, absolutely. But they got 2 weeks coming here without a ranked opponent, and then they go 3 of their last 4 against ranked opponents, top 20, top 15 opponents, and they play Washington State to close it out, which was a ranked team too. So that's a gauntlet even outside of the Pac-12 championship. All right, you saw him up in person, Caleb Williams. He had a night to not remember. He had a night to forget in South Bend as the Irish upset the Trojans. Joshua, what'd you see?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was super excited to see the best player in college football. They told me this guy was better than advertised when I asked the Notre Dame coaching staff about him. And he certainly—
They said he was better than advertised.
Wow. He didn't prove it to me on the field there. I believe this was the first game that he ever played in where he had multiple interceptions. And what he did to his team is criminal, because he put a bad defense in a position where they had a short field to defend. Notre Dame left that game with 250 yards just about, right? USC's never held an opponent to 250 yards, and they get beat by like 4 touchdowns.
Another Pac-12 matchup. Stanford had been struggling, so you may not know the name. Well, you better know the name now. Elik Iomanor had himself a night helping Stanford erase a 29-point deficit in a comeback win versus Colorado. Joshua, how do you make sense of this one?
Too bad I was asleep, right? I wish I would have been able to see this. Colorado, I've been telling people, statistically, one of the worst defenses in the nation. And it shows up every single week. They probably felt like they were just going to be able to beat Stanford.
Hey, we watched the tape together. It's not just statistically. The film, not great.
Yeah, no, they're a bad squad there. But, you know, Deion's a guy who's relied on the transfer portal to build up his team for the season. And we see that it has shortcomings. So if you're a team like a Michigan State or a Northwestern that will be going through a rebuild, what's the proper way to build a program nowadays?
In order to, you have to use the portal to your advantage when you're turning over a program, because typically you're implementing a new scheme. I look at Matt Rule in Nebraska. It's a 3-3-5 defense. They went to the transfer portal. But a quality program, and every coach I've talked to about this says, hey, we recruit as the foundation of our team. You still have to recruit well. There has to be a foundation for a house to be built on top of that. So you recruit well, you develop well, and then you supplement with transfer portal. Early on, that may be the scales may be flipped there. Early on, you probably have to go to the transfer portal, but it's not sustainable to have a 50-man turnover every single year.
I mean, I look at the way Jim Harbaugh's done it at Michigan, and he's recruited high schoolers, and he's developed those guys, a great developmental program. But he's also said, hey, man, there's a couple dudes out there in the portal who are team captains, great leadership guys that can step in right away and help our team chase a championship. I think is what you have to do. For Michigan State, they had success with Mel Tucker in 1 year going through the portal, but you see when the roster starts to turn over and you don't have that core base of guys, it's hard to do. So I think that they're a team who's going to have to maybe get in the portal early on, but really sell to high schoolers that it is a destination to where they can come, learn, grow, and ultimately develop into 3-4 year players that are guys who can make an impact. For Northwestern, I think the calculus is much different, though, because this is a high academic school. And so you can't admit guys from anywhere, right? Like, you can't just get guys in. They're going to have to really figure out what their plan of attack is when they go for high schoolers, because I think that's where most of the rebuild is going to go. And in this day and age, I think there's an opportunity to telling young people that you can come to a school where you can get a phenomenal degree that is also in one of the biggest cities and media markets in America. I know a lot of people aren't invested in that football team, but opportunity is everywhere around us here in Chicago.
I would say philosophically, to look at Colorado, where you can recruit skill position well in the portal, but you cannot turn over your entire offensive line.
No.
That is a dependent position. You can plug and play.
It's the hardest thing to build regardless.
You need to develop. You can maybe get 1 or 2 a year, but you really need to hit the trenches hard. Otherwise, you know, that's one that's going to be tougher. Skill, Keon Coleman, you go down, you're good to go, right? The rest of you got to hit the recruiting trail to develop your offensive line. All right, that's it for us now, but not quite it in general. We have our guys from Rivals Down South. You guys awake over there? Come on. It's the conference clash between the Big Ten and the SEC. That's next here on Stadium.
Time for a little conference clash here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, bringing in our guys Hebert, Hebert, and Hudson Mason from Rivals Down South. And I wanted to do a little college football playoff check-in here because we're feeling good about Michigan. We got a big game here in the Big Ten coming up between Ohio State and Penn State. Feel pretty good about those teams. I'm scrolling through my timeline today, and they're talking about Brock Bowers over there at Georgia. Great player. Really probably won in the game against an Auburn team who I don't think is very good in the first place. And it seems like he's going to be out for an extended period of time. Blessings and prayers to that young man so he recovers because he's a phenomenal player. But, I mean, how are we feeling about the playoff chances down south, boys?
Look. It's not feeling great today. I'm not gonna lie. Look, Georgia's the SEC champion. I think will be impossible to keep out of the playoff, even if that end up being a 2-loss LSU. Now we've never seen it before, and granted, with UNC doing so well, Florida State, like the ACC's looking like they'll produce a really great candidate. Who knows what's going to happen in the Pac-12? I love Washington. I'm a UW guy. Go Penix. That was awesome this weekend. It certainly doesn't feel as strong as we all got going on. But don't worry. I mean, one of y'all is about to get knocked out this weekend between Ohio State and Penn State, right? So that'll be one less team to worry about.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, I wanted to ask you something because you just planted a funny thought in my head. Let's say Georgia has not. Well, look, they can easily still run the table, right? But let's say it is a 2-loss LSU. All right, let's say they win the SEC. Let's say Iowa goes 11-1 and wins the Big Ten title. Does Iowa get in with one loss over a 2-loss LSU?
Yes.
It's a sickos committee right there.
They should. And let's be clear, I wanted to take this time to thank you all in Big Ten country for the creation of Iowa football. It's just an unbelievably unique and glorious product. I legitimately waited to bet to the under to get it as low as it possibly could. I got it at 33.5, and it never even got threatened. What Kirk Ferentz has done there it's a masterpiece. It's a work of art. It is truly unreal stuff. I love the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Jake wants me to defend Iowa right now on the Big Ten side, and I'm not going to do it. I'm absolutely not going to do it.
I'm glad you got my back, Bob.
If it comes down to a 2-loss LSU and a 1-loss Iowa, take LSU all day.
Oh, wow. I mean, I think the people would rather see Jayden Daniels. That is that.
They'd rather see any offense,
so, right?
Really. Like any offense with the pulse that can move the football at all. They'd rather see.
All right. You already know what that means. Let's do a little switch. Time to get into a little SEC. And, well, to be fair, it is big news in the SEC what happened to Brock Bowers right now. Bigger news, sure, than whatever Penn State it might be, or I don't know. Like, sure, Maryland did something this weekend. Brock Bowers, hurt, high ankle sprain. Georgia beats Vanderbilt once again in kind of unimpressive fashion. Hudson, I'll go to you here first. Let us know how big of a deal it is that Brock Bowers is now out for your Georgia Bulldogs. And then I know you wanted to ask Jake about what it can mean for Bowers moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge deal, obviously. I mean, I'm stating the obvious. This is a guy who you probably don't win the Auburn game without him. He is your best all-around player. And outside of a quarterback, he is a guy before his injury that I thought could be a dark horse Heisman, if not just at least get invited to New York. Now, that's not going to happen anymore. But just when Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator, and Carson Beck, a few games into the year, started to find a rhythm and started to figure out how to use Brock Bowers, he unfortunately gets hurt Saturday against Vanderbilt. And it looks like he's going to be out a minimum of 4 weeks, maybe up to 6 weeks, which would put him back at the earliest against Tennessee in November, more like maybe the SEC championship game in Atlanta. So this is a huge loss. And I know I do radio here in Atlanta, Jake, and I know a lot of people, Georgia fans today, were wondering, with his projection of being probably a first-round draft pick, will Georgia fans even see him back? Would love to get your opinion on that. What would your advice be?
Yeah, so look, it's 4 to 6 weeks. Whether he's back in 4 or whether he's back in 6, the first week you're not going to be fully back. And I think you have to consider how special this guy is for every reason you just said, Hudson. Like, when you ask, hey, can you do your job? How good are you at doing your singular job? I don't know that there's a player better in college football at doing his job than Brock Bowers. He's that special. I think he's the top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year. So all that in mind, understanding his future, there has to be a consideration to say, man, we got to protect this. Because this guy has a chance to be one of the all-time greats in the NFL, even beyond college football. And I think Kirby Smart and Brock Bowers and those in his network have to consider that. I know Georgia has big goals this year, but this isn't a situation you want to rush it and risk further injury and further damage to his ankle. But it sounds like, hey, if Georgia's in a good position, they can get him back for the playoffs.
Does him already being a 2-time national champion, Jake, you think alter his perspective on coming back? Hey, I've got my 2 natties, like, as opposed to if he hadn't won one already?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I mean, there's a lot of people that come to college and say, man, I'd love to win a national champion, and no one else has done that other than Georgia these past 2 years. They've been that good. But I still do know as a competitor, how rare is a three-peat, right? Like that's a conversation in his mind and in the rest of the team's mind. That is dominance that you rarely see in college football. So it alters it, but I still think he would love to have a three-peat if it all works out.
Joshua, I want to flip this to you next and to give us some defensive perspective here, because we got a bunch of offensive guys. And look, when I think about Bowers, everything y'all just said, you look at the production right now for Georgia. He's basically doubling up any of the other receivers and weapons on the team right now. On top of that, he plays tight end, right? We talked about it last week. He is an outlier at that position nationally. Like Ohio State to Boogie, he's the closest, and he's like way behind Bowers. Defensively, from a defensive perspective, can you just replace Brock Bowers' production by being like, oh, we'll just throw it more to Rosemary-Jack-Saint, the wide receiver, and Ladd McConkey? Or are you losing just as much because you're losing the kind of unique nature of what a great tight end brings to bear?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those guys are going to have more opportunities, so they can make up some of the production, but there's also a reason why Bowers was the feature there, and I think it's the idea of the mismatch. And what stands out to me about his game is certainly they'll split him out, they'll put him in line. I watched on one play last year, I believe it was Kent State, it doesn't matter who it was, they hand him an end around. You don't do that with tight ends, right? That shows the type of athlete that he is. And I think about the game in terms of matchups. I also think about the game in terms of what defensive personnels have to do, right? So when you're playing a team and they have a tight end and he's not a big movement tight end, a lot of times you say, okay, we can get that backer out there and we can just go 1-for-1. Mm-hmm. When you're playing with a guy like Brock Bowers, you have the conflict of, do we need to have a safety, a tight end, or maybe even a cornerback on this guy? And then how many guys are we going to devote to him? Are we going to lean our coverage? Are we going to play brackets on him? Because he's that dangerous. And so now, to me, there are more resources that can be devoted to other parts of the Georgia offense, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for them.
I want to, just to continue off of that, just think about who typically has to guard a tight end. It's a linebacker and or a safety. And with those two positions, run support, particularly with linebacker, that's your first priority, right? Like if there's play action, you have to respect it in your downhill to start the play. That first second is spent supporting the run. But when you're playing a guy like Brock Bowers, there is always a thought in your mind, like, I have to be aware where he is. And it's probably not just the linebacker or just the safety. It's probably both of them. With him out of the game, you could be a little bit late to coverage now because there's a significant drop-off from Bowers to the next guy.
I think there's an idea, to your point, that you can take the air out of the offense a little bit, right? I think things become a little bit stickier because you're not worried about that particular mismatch.
So Georgia already trying to do the impossible, and now losing what I believe to be the best Heisman candidate on their team, Carson Beck. Mike Bobo, you better be for real, because otherwise it ain't going to happen. So from one Heisman candidate to a Heisman winner, Caleb Williams goes into South Bend this weekend, and I got to say, boys, this did not feel like a good matchup for the Trojans from the beginning. Marcus Freeman's got a salty defense up there. They play coverage. I think they're like cover one main, and that's mainly what Caleb Williams has struggled against this year. And the Irish take advantage. Williams makes mistakes. It's a weird box score in that USC ends up with a bit more volume, more time of possession, but the Irish were excellent when it came to taking advantage of every situation, turning turnovers into touchdowns. Hudson, as our quarterback here on the panel, what did you see out of Caleb Williams' performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to an extent, this is kind of what we saw USC struggle with last year. I mean, he got sacked 6 times, right? And a lot of the running around, a lot of the feeling or seeing, shall I say, in the pocket instead of feeling the pressure. And as a quarterback, when you start to get hit and hit and hit, the natural reaction is you start to see things instead of feel things. And I thought a couple times, like, he left the pocket too early, and that's a byproduct of Notre Dame hitting him early and hitting him often. But this was a guy who had been taking care of the football. He'd been seeing things. What it shows to me is that the Pac-12, I know this wasn't a Pac-12, purely a Pac-12 matchup, but the Pac-12 is a very deep conference. USC, Washington, Oregon. You could say USC is probably the third best team out of those right now. I think Caleb Williams probably cost himself the Heisman Saturday night, especially with the interceptions. That was my biggest takeaway, but a really bad loss. I think the other thing I take away, guys, is like a lot of headlines, a lot of flash with USC, but not a lot of substance where it matters the most. And that's exactly what we thought about them last year.
I mean, they're still ass on defense, Yeah. Alex Grinch always has been, and it appears that he always may be. I mean, at a certain point, Lincoln Riley's got to make a move. So Caleb Williams loses the Heisman. Hey, red corner, blue corner, boys, it's blind graphic time. That's right. Let's play the game again. Put up the numbers. Caleb Williams out. Here are two quarterbacks' numbers. Potential Heisman candidates. You see player 1 and player 2 there, both elite, both incredible. Joshua, who do you think is who here? Who would you take to win the Heisman?
I mean, we got a little bit more touchdown production over there for player 1, higher completion percentage, less yardage, but you like to take the scores.
You're leaving out one stat. What's a quarterback judged by? Where's the wins?
Whoa. Hold on now. Shut up, Jake. That is not the point. We are looking at numbers, okay? Look at these numbers right here. Who's player 1? Who's player 2?
That's a great question. Reveal them for me. I don't know.
Is it SEC and Big Ten? Okay.
There we go. Jaden
Wow.
Daniels is player 1. Michael Penix Jr., player 2. And I want to be clear about this up front, boys. We have fun here.
Yeah.
Michael Penix Jr. should be first in the Heisman race. Okay, let's. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, and it's because Penix has the better wins, including just that absolute gem on Saturday, which is incredible, so much fun. But Jayden Daniels should be second in the Heisman race right now, with the opportunity to move to first if that LSU team can come up with some big wins in Tuscaloosa, an SEC championship. If you look at total yardage, thanks to his rushing, Jayden Daniels leading the country at 400 yards a game. He's second in touchdowns accounted for. He's first in quarterback rating. He's right above J.J. McCarthy. There is nobody playing better football. Now, the wins are where they are. Awful LSU defense. But nobody's playing better football, boys, than Jayden Daniels right now.
Very few guys getting more cracks at it than Jayden Daniels, too, because you look at that LSU defense. I mean, as much as those guys are getting run through, we watched the Ole Miss game, and it seemed like everybody was getting a shot to put up yardage and points and touchdowns. This is not a knock here. It's just talking about stylistically how the stats end up to this point. But I don't disagree with the point that you're making here. If we're talking about outstanding players, yes, he's in the conversation squarely for me because I love what he does with the football in his hands.
No, this is a perfect example, and you said it so well there, Joshua. Stats in college football are extremely deceiving because of the variance you have in schedule. I mean, Washington, probably the game of the year last week against Oregon, so we get to see Penix at his best for 4 quarters, but they're blowing teams out, right? And when you're relying on passing numbers, you're running the ball in the second half. A really good team, your starters are going to miss effectively what ends up being like 2 full games by not playing halfway through the third and into the fourth quarter. And even in the second half, when you're blowing teams out, you're going to run the ball. So Jayden Daniels, more opportunities. Michael Penix, not as much. Still don't want to discredit what he's doing as a quarterback for LSU.
Okay. Well, first off, yes, those all work from a volume perspective. Remember, QB rating's a measure of efficiency, right? There's a reason why J.J. McCarthy's second in the country. Jaden's still first. Hudson, you're the quarterback on this panel. What do you think about Jayden Daniels right now?
Oh, I mean, I think he's playing phenomenal. There's no arguing that. I think, the one thing I would give Penix right now is he's had that big moment, and that was Saturday against Oregon. And when you talk about winning the Heisman, voters get enamored with what's your Heisman moment. You could say Dylan Gabriel's the one other quarterback that had it against Texas at the end of the game. It has to be a big stage. It has to be on national television. Your team has to have a certain record. And so Michael Penix is one of the very few quarterbacks so far that kind of has all of those things going for him. And the fact that he didn't even have his second best receiver and he led his team back from a win. He had his Heisman moment. And, the one thing that stuck out to me, guys, the way that he's playing, if you look at Caleb Williams and his stats last year, yards per game, passing touchdowns, QBR, and yards per attempt, Michael Penix is better than him when Caleb Williams ran away with it at this point last year. So that puts it into perspective just how good a football he's playing.
It almost felt like last year there was nobody to give the trophy to except for Caleb Williams, right? Like we ended up with basically if you were a quarterback whose team was in the college football playoff, you were in New York, except for Caleb, right? And so I feel like that's a part of the calculus too. Is there more guys this year that I think are just playing really good football?
Yeah, I agree. Wins matter more this year because there's just a ton of quality quarterback play. All right, Joshua Perry. All right, Jake Butt. Red corner, blue corner. We're going to say goodbye. You boys are off. Holla, because we got to talk Mizzou, Kentucky. Yeah, that's the good stuff, guys. Coming up next, me and Hudson are going to go around the SEC. Keep it locked here on Rivals Down South. Going on, y'all. Welcome back to Rivals Down South here on Watch Stadium. Shout out to everyone hanging out with us on YouTube, youtube.com/@WatchStadium. Let's go around the SEC and recap the weekend. The Alabama Crimson Tide looking like they were about to handle the Arkansas Razorbacks. They jump out to a 24-6 lead, and then everything just kind of slows down for Alabama. And yes, they still end up winning 24-21, or 27-20, excuse me. But just an odd I don't know what to make out of this Alabama team, Hudson. One week we come in, we're like, we're sucked. The empire's crumbling. Nick Saban is done. And then the next week they do something impressive. We're like, oh, not so fast. They're still in control. And even in this game, they're still in control. They win, but it's hardly the overwhelming Crimson Tide of the past. Like if I asked you today, is Alabama still the favorite in the West? What would your answer be?
I would say yes, just because I don't know that while Alabama, maybe they lose to LSU, I don't see Alabama losing 2 more SEC games. So I would still have them as a
Well, they
favorite.
wouldn't need to though. Hold on, they wouldn't need to now
yeah,
because
with the
if
tiebreaker.
if Ole Miss loses to Georgia, if Ole Miss loses, then LSU controls their own destiny in terms of their potential to get to Atlanta.
Yeah, so it essentially would come down to that Alabama LSU game for the West.
Yes.
If that played out just like that. I think I would still have Alabama as a favorite just because I think, look, when you look at offensive and defensively, are they what they are in the past? No. But I still think the liabilities of LSU's defense collectively is a bigger liability than any liability that Alabama has, if that makes sense. At this point, we're kind of comparing question marks. And I think while you could still say Jalen Milroe's a question mark, their offensive line at Alabama is absolutely a question mark. I compare those to the question marks of LSU, and I just trust I trust Alabama more right now than I trust LSU's defense. Sorry, T-Bob, to break your heart.
Yeah, it's completely fair, dude. I'm not going to tell anyone to believe in this LSU defense. I did believe, like an idiot, in the Aggies and their defense. And as Mike would say, Jimbo Fisher. And Jimbo Fisher let me down once again. Picked A&M to go into Neyland and come away with the win. Didn't happen. Tennessee wins. I thought that A&M rush defense would be able to hold serve. Not the case. Joe Milton didn't do anything, but Joe Milton didn't have to do anything as the Vols run for 232 against what was the best rush defense in the SEC. How do you score this one for Tennessee, Hudson? What's it mean for the Vols?
It's a huge win. And I think it's a huge win because look how they won, T-Bob. Like, they're winning completely differently than they won last year with the big passes and the Heisman contending quarterback. Like, Tennessee is winning with running the football and playing really good defense. And I'll be honest, I was super skeptical ever since Josh Heupel got to Knoxville that they could win at a high level, let alone win a championship, because of their defense. Like, this system promotes the offense. The offense gets the first seat on the bus. The offense gets the special treatment because it's all about offense. But man, they're playing great defense, and all you got to do is look at the last 2 drives of the game. They get turnovers. A&M gets the ball back even after the first Mac Johnson pick, and they got a chance to go down and score. And what does Tennessee do? They bow their neck and get another stop. So, man, they go into Alabama this week, and the way this running game is going, it just doesn't feel like all the pressure is on the passing game like it did last year.
Hudson, you want to hear something crazy? Look, A&M's, I've got 3 pieces of information that A&M's got to move on from Jimbo. Here's A&M's last 24 second half drives. They had halftime leads in both these games. Punt, fumble, punt, touchdown, pick, field goal, fumble, punt, missed field goal, fumble, pick, punt, missed field goal, safety, field goal, punt, field goal, missed field goal, pick. It is awful. Jimbo Fisher all time at Texas A&M is 7-15 on the road. $100 million for a coach who can't even sniff 500 on the road. And here's the kicker. Since they joined the SEC in 2012, Texas A&M has spent $895 million on stadium, facility upgrades, and guaranteed head coaching salaries. And they have the exact same win percentage, 53%, that they did in the Big 12. Unreal. And if they fire Jimbo, that's going to get closer to $1 billion. All right, next on this list. So, this feels great for the Vols for everything you said, Hudson. Awful for the Aggies. And then there's the LSU Tigers, who end up blowing out Auburn. I thought LSU was going to win this game. I was a little worried about Auburn's talent in the trenches, but LSU's offense is just unstoppable right now. What do you think, though? Was the fact that Auburn only puts up 18, is that more of a commentary on LSU's defense, or Auburn's just complete ineptitude on the offensive side of the ball?
I lean more toward Auburn being inept on the offensive side of the ball. They're playing two quarterbacks, Peyton Thorne, Robbie Ashford. Neither of them are great throwers. That's stating the obvious. I mean, they really kept Georgia in the game just by purely being able to use Robbie Ashford's legs. So, but sometimes, man, football's weird in the sense that maybe LSU's playing Auburn at the right time. Their defense needs something to feel good about. They need something to kind of watch on tape on Monday and Tuesday and like regain their confidence. Like, do you remember? I don't know if you've seen the movie The Help, and in that movie, T-Bob, The Help, great movie. The maid tells the little daughter, "You are kind, you are smart, you are intelligent. You are kind, you are smart, you are intelligent." She's reinforcing to the young girl that she needs to believe in herself. I think somebody needs to tell this LSU defense right now, you are kind, you are smart, you're intelligent, you're good. So they believe in themselves, and maybe that's what happened with Auburn.
Yeah, just a little positive affirmation. One man who needs no positive affirmation is Jayden Daniels. He's unbelievable. Coming up next, the Florida Gators cured their road woes this weekend and why Mark Stoops may need a pony up after Kentucky's second loss. Keep it locked right here on Rivals Down South, youtube.com/Watch Stadium. Welcome back to Rivals Down South here on Stadium. T-Bob Hebert, Hudson Mason hanging out with you. Hudson, I don't know that there is a team hotter this year in the SEC than the Missouri Tigers. They go into Lexington, nighttime. Kentucky's wearing the black. Tough environment. Kentucky's kicking their ass early, up 14-0, 10 yards of carry on the ground. And then all of a sudden, Mizzouans have outscored him 38-7 to end the big road win. And Brady Cook and Luther Burden didn't even play that well.
Yeah.
Massive win for the Tigers.
If you didn't see this game and you just checked the box score, or if you didn't see the game and you just checked the score, you would have said, oh, Luther Burden went off again. Brady Cook played well. Not the case at all. They had like 300 yards of offense, and their punter threw the ball more than Iowa's starting quarterback did this week. So I think that says a lot, though, about where Missouri is under Eli Drinkwitz. They know how to kind of win ugly now, whereas maybe in the years past, that feels like a game they probably would have lost and fumbled last year, T-Bob.
Well, and what about Mark Stoops, dude? I mean, Mark Stoops last week is on his radio show. If you want us to win, maybe you should pony up some money. I mean, look at Georgia. They got 75 guys they bought. They're great. He's not lying. But guess what, Mark? What, Mizzou, they have more money than you? The Missouri Tigers, they just bought better players than you to go into your house and beat your ass and look like the second best team in the East when you're supposed to be that guy? I don't know. Bad weekend to be Mark Stoops. Hudson, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody hanging out with us. Our Rivals down south. They'll watch Stadium back tomorrow. Some more Rivals.